Okay. Fine. It's live. Okay, I'm sorry I have to review. I started without going live. I'm very sorry for those of you who've been sitting here. So what we're trying to do right now is something not the meals on. What we're trying to do is something unusual. Please mute yourself, Daniel, because the kids are with you. Very good. And we, instead of simply summarizing, as we usually do, the parsha, giving a theme for the parsha, which would be Vayigash Tavshin Ayin Vav, we'd like to focus on how it is that Vayigash also relates very profoundly to the time in which it occurs, to the Idyonim of Hanukkah, and to the special things that happen in Tevet from Chet to Yud, Chet, Tet, and Yud, 3 days of Tevet. And those 3 days, of course, as the Gemara tells us, with the Shloshi Yemei Choshech, in which the Targum of the Torah into Yavanis, 3 days of darkness, came to the world, which is pretty shocking because we're just finished with Hanukkah, in which normally the union of the Golus is that we're capable of absorbing those aspects and maintaining it. And the truth is, of course, we know that Chazal tell us that the Yafta Lokim Liyefet is something that's very, very profound. It changes our perception of the dinim of Kriya of Sefer Torah, and we're able to be Koreh. And as the Rambam explains, there was something that's not modern Greek, it's that the Greek that the Torah is capable of being translated into in terms of Kriya is not the Greek that we know, but the Greek of that time of Hanukkah was amazingly capable of actually maintaining the multi-leveled approaches of Chazal within the Torah, and therefore it was possible to actually translate the Torah in a way that would be kosher l'kriya. Could I ask you maybe just to get it to you? You know how to do it? Yeah. Okay. All right. So, yeah, so Moshe, keep on typing. Mishi said it all. Yeah. Okay. Just give it to him, he'll bring it in. Forgive me. And the other taniyot, which are functions of the months, and they're always called the Chodesh HaX and the Chodesh HaY and the Chodesh HaZ. These are the Tzom HaX, HaTzom HaY, HaTzom HaZ. Has a completely different application when it comes to Asara Betevet. Asara Betevet, the Navi Yecheskel is told specifically, Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh, that you have to write down this day, because this is the day that we need to have Bichtav, that you said that Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh, the Melech Bavel, was Somech on Yerushalayim. That Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh is exactly as the Briskerov points out, the lashon that we find by Yom Kippur itself, the day that is Derech Shabbos in terms of its own, and that's called Nefesh Asher Lo Yuneh Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh, which means that remarkably there's something that is unique about this time because of those specific words. The question is, of course, why? I mean, what is it about it that would make it a Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh? And why is it that that would be the way specifically that we would refer to the special elements that make it part of something that would be Derech Shabbos? I mean, I understand if you're telling me that it's a main Gzera Shava and Divrei Kabbalah, okay. But I mean, what does it imply? Why now? And how indeed would it relate to the days of darkness? How does it relate to what the other things that happened on Chet and Tet? Chet and Tet was not only the 3 days of darkness, but are also the deaths. We know Tet, we just read it in the Slichot, as the Meforshim on the Shulchan Aruch point out, even though the Mechaber says something happened, but he doesn't know what it is. And as they point out, that what's unique is what we see in the Slichos, that it was the death of Ezra, which was on Tet, and what isn't as well known is that the death of Nehemiah took place the day before. So these two people that together were achroi, as we saw when we were learning Ezra Nehemiah, that they were achroi for a process that ends up creating the chen la, essentially, of Chanukah itself, which is the Dvar Hashem Lizrubavel and the Nerei Zechariah. These two people actually died during those Yemei Choshech, that were days that ended up being miyuad as these days of Choshech, which is amazing because that creates a sense of how all of the time is really fundamentally related, because whatever it is that went wrong with their binyan and with the Chanukah that resulted from it in the chen la, as the Nerei Zechariah end with, whatever went wrong is exactly what happens in terms of Churban Mamish. In other words, there is some hint here to a process that will allow us to understand what the Asara Betevet is, the sense of the beginning of Churban, and how it is that it relates back to these times. And since it's Nergeya, specifically the elements of Vayigash, I want to turn to the summary of the Shir on the Parsha to be able to get a better idea of what it's about. Now, what we found in the Shir this year was that Miketz empties into Vayigash in profound literary ways. In other words, the Torah actually creates an amazing sense of expectation of closure. And it's a closure that doesn't happen, which we pointed out is actually a recent development in modern theories of aesthetics and so on, that the creation of that kind of anticipation, when it isn't closed, to some extent almost defines the difference between the old way in which people appreciated music. They waited for that last chord, you know? And if there's a lost chord, then you sit there and it's unresolved forever. And it's horrible. I mean, if your mother tells you to turn off the music before it's finished, you're ready to shoot, you know? And that, of course, is exactly what happens here. We're waiting for 22 years of planning to be able to reach the moment of truth. The Torah keeps us hanging. There's a stuma instead of a ptucha at the end between the gates of the Vayigash, which allows us to believe that, okay, so we're still holding here. We need to see the very next piece. And that next piece doesn't happen. It doesn't happen the way that we expected it. Instead, we find all the Midrashim talking about the Ishtvanot Yitlena and the way that Yosef's inability to control the situation because of the lo yochol yitapek meant that he had to put himself into a matzav, which seems to us very sad. You know, and it's really, I'm just avut reservi, so to speak. And I mean, and the whole idea in which we were waiting for a real turnabout and the recognition of everything that was done wrong instead becomes tainez against Yosef, and even an attempt, according to the Medrash, to murder Yosef on the spot for what it is that they were put through, and a complete, what appears to be a complete lack of the type of relationship of, wow, we thought that everybody was going to come together and get it. We don't see this. And that disappointment, the anticlimactic end of this, is so similar to what happens on Hanukkah itself, or in these 3 days of Koshech. In both senses, in the Hanukkah sense and the Parsha sense, the outstanding issues remain, and they seem to be as yet open-ended, so that the anticlimactic issues that remain open between the brothers later on, the chashash that Yosef wants to murder them, and the idea of the way in which they were trying to undo Yosef's tikkun with Paro and open up their own channels of communication that would make them independent of Yosef, which fails miserably, but which creates a horrible diplomatic faux pas in the Parsha. It's very similar here to the breakdown of Hanukkah itself, as the Rambam says, as the Ramban says here, which is remarkable because it's even Nogea, the issue that comes out of this parasha. And of course, that is the Malchus of Yehuda, and that is the Lo Yasro Shevet Mi Yehuda, which, as the Ramban says, is the reason that Hanukkah ends up failing, which means that there's something about the tikkun that we assume would happen here that didn't happen, both in Hanukkah and in the Parshat Tzavra. So it would appear there's exactly the same issues on the surface. In reality, we discovered that there is a massive transformation in Vayigash, which can easily be missed. And there's a very good reason, as we'll see, for why it can easily be missed. And the transformation is so profound that it actually is a transformation in the nature of relationships within Yisrael. It's a transformation in the relationship between Yisrael and the nations of the world. And of course, we would expect such a thing because this is the parsha of the listing of the Shivim Nafesh, which is Yatsev Vulot Amim Lemispar B'nai Yisrael. And these are those B'nai Yisrael. These are the Shivim, which you will recall, as the Ramban explained, is the whole point of called. Abraham, please mute yourself. Please mute yourself. There we go. Thank you. So that is also, and perhaps in the deepest way, is a transformation within the relationships between the elements of mind in a single human being. And that is perhaps the most remarkable, the most intimate of the transformations that occur here. And it is, because of that, the very creation of Yisrael, which for the first time is referred to here as an entity called Yisrael. Not B'nai Yisrael, but actually Yisrael sits as an entity in Mitzrayim for the first time. And that is an extremely central and seminal movement for everything here. Thank you. Now, what we saw as the finest example of the instantaneous and profound change that was achieved, initially by Yehuda, and it was catalyzed by Yehuda. It's easy to miss if you don't look carefully, because what happens is that Yehuda starts talking to Yosef and brings him to the point in which he includes him as an accusation of those who would end up being responsible for the destruction of their father. And as he explains the relationship, as you know, if we come, and Hayela Lenenoiti, V'nafsho Kshura B'nafsho. That word Nafsho Kshura B'nafsho, we might have missed its tremendous significance if it wouldn't have been that the other example in Tanakh of the Nafsho Kshura B'nafsho is a precise translation of what happens here. And that other occurrence is Vatiki Nefesh Yonatan Kishura B'nefesh David, which of course is the connection made between Yehuda and Binyamin. Exactly what happened over here when Yehuda, because of the next pasuk, which is, and as Rashi points out, Ki avdecha arav et hana'ar. You might ask, says Rashi, why am I blabbing so much and accuse me of sticking my nose into something that really shouldn't be my business? Oh, but it is my business, you see. Because, and this is the lashon of Rashi, ani niksharti b'kesher chazak. The same words of the nafsho kshura b'nafsho. Now, you have to understand the implications of this thing. For Yehuda to be able to say nafsho kshura b'nafsho is a violation of everything that he believed for the past 30 years. Remember that the whole point of Yehuda and the Achim's relationship to Yaakov Avinu during this entire period was the profound resentment of what they saw as something that was an unjustified romantic connection to Rachel, which over here he also acknowledges, Kishnayim Yodali Ishti, and as I'll point out, Ishti, he only really had one wife, and that was Rachel. And it's because of that, indeed, as we know, even though HaKadosh Baruch Hu was busy creating during this whole period, Orosh Mashiach, this Orosh Mashiach comes about through exactly those words. In the story of Boaz and Ruth, which takes place in Beit Lechem of Yehuda, as the Medrash points out, it's Zikne Yehuda, who are the ones who say, Yitena Isha Ba'al K'poch Beitecha, Ki Rachel first. Which means that even Zikne Yehuda, that comes from here. The relationship that built the entire nation is from here. Remember, our nation consists of that connection between Yehuda and Binyamin. It's there that the Beis HaMikdash was created, which absorbs Levi through Yosef's own involvement, as we had seen. Stop it. Oh, my grandchildren keep doing this right at the time that we have the gift. There's some way to tell them not to do it again using the phone. And not only that, but the Beis HaMikdash itself is so deeply involved in that relationship that it actually is built of a line that goes through in a diagonal zigzag in order to include special parts within Yehuda and Binyamin, so that the Lishkas HaGazis is included in Yehuda's territory, which is, of course, Yehuda Shalach Lahorot Lefanav here, and the Mizbeach and the connection to the Yashras HaShekhinah is given over to the Binyamin HaChofeifel of Kol Hayom, and this is the thing that lasts us, because it's because of that we're called Yehudim. The nation, the country that ended up emerging from this was all that Tikkun of Yehuda and Binyamin. What's more, we think that, okay, that's just a nice example of a change. No, it's not an example, and it's not a model. It actually becomes a complete redefinition for Yisrael. It's because of that that there's a development in the relationship of Yisrael and the Umot Olam always across the board, and it's because of that that we find here in this parsha the special relationship that evolves between Yaakov and Paro, which allows actually the Mayim to be utterly cross-eyed. It's the reason that Paro is here described by Rashi as a friend of Yosef, and indeed such an amazing friend, truly an amazing friend, that as soon as he grasps what is happening, he insists on, and nobody understands, why does he do this? You know, he hears about it, and right away it says, and so Paro immediately sends a message to Yosef, listen here, I'm taking over, atatsu veta, zotasu, you listen to me. This is the way we're going to deal with this. We're going to send up these agalot. This is what you got to tell your brothers. This is what you got to tell your father. What the heck is that all about? Oh my God, what is it all about? It's one of the most brilliant and striking episodes in the entire Tanakh. It is Paro's insight that Yosef is going to have such a problem if he attempts to tell people what to do after all of this. And he therefore says, I know what we need to avoid. The last thing we need is for you to be teaching them what to do and have them resent what's happening. Forget it. Please, Yosef, allow me to take over. Move out of the way. How do you know all of this? Because he knows Yosef, because he loves Yosef, because he's connected to Yosef. I mean, it's such an incredible depth of true friendship. And it to such an extent, amazingly, Rashi in Avodah Zarah defines the relationship between Rebbe and Antoninus. We know an amazing relationship the Gemara talks about, where they had a tunnel between them and the whole discussions that they had about the Shaykhs to Olam Haba. That was Rebbe and Antoninus. The same thing happens with Rav, the next generations. Rav and Archie was also massively important Roman. And both of them, in their times, mention at the death of their friend, Antoninus dies, Rebbe says the word nit parda chavila. Archer dies, and Rav says, nit parda chavila. And amazingly, Rashi, in a just burst of Ruach HaKodesh, says nit parda chavila means our love. Shenikshara nafshenu nefesh b'nefesh. Exactly the same words. It's like so striking that he would use this. And this, of course, becomes our modality, whether it's in terms of Daniel's relationship to Nebuchadnezzar later, whether it's Esther's unbelievable relationship to Achashverosh, in which she teaches him what it means to fall in love. And of course, the most recent, so to speak, in terms of the Tanakh, the last of the Tanachite relationships of this type is Nehemiah and Hatashata, as we saw. And it was that special relationship that allowed Nehemiah, we will find out, who managed in actually establishing in the end what was to become the Chen law of Hanukkah itself, so many centuries later. From that beginning, which was the Baz Liyom Ketanot, something that seemed so insignificant that people literally were mavazet during the entire period, and Ezra had not succeeded in taking it out of that bizoyan. And as we've seen throughout Nehemiah, this is so central to him, the state in which the Yehudim are viewed, and how it is that the Oivim are capable of having this shlita. Essentially, what the Parsha achieves is an amazing thing, because the only way that Yehuda, through the Koach of Hodah, could possibly have become Yaakov, which is essentially what happened. In other words, he was the one who literally became the one whose nefesh was Kshura b'nafsho, the very description that he had given of Binyamin to the ostensible ruler of Mitzrayim became his own nefesh. Why? Because that's the din of a guarantor. An arev is indeed in locum the baldavar. But that means that the reality of the relationship that he took responsibility for was so profound that it meant that any personal feelings that he had about it, any psychology that would get in the way, any issues that he had simply did not exist. Because what he was looking at, and the nature of that kesher that Rashi is describing, is defined ani nitkasharti ba'olam hazeh u'ba'olam haba. I am not talking about the me of this life. I am talking about the me who exists in this universe. So in other words, essentially what he was doing is transforming something that had been in the realm of psychology, emotions, shitot, philosophy, whatever you'd like, and has turned it into something that is so purely existential that in the face of it, his own concerns simply didn't even register. It's like they didn't exist. That transformation, which of course becomes the real practical solution, and it's what drives Shaul crazy about the relationship of Yonatan and David, such that Shaul himself does to them what it was that they were doing to the relationship of Yaakov to Yosef. Amazing. So he accuses him of having fallen in love with David. Lebosh techa, lebosh et ervati mecha. What a disaster. Don't you know that as long as this idiot is alive, there's no future for you. You're not going to have the Malchus. And of course, as far as Yonatan is concerned, that's what he tells David. It's wonderful. I want you to be Melech. Halavai, I should be able to be your Mishnah. And so on and so forth. It's an amazing thing. But that transformation is not, as you would think, a transformation from the person who feels into the person who has become merely an abstracted vision of what existence in Olam Hazeh is about, but on the contrary. If you consider what happens here, it is precisely what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does for us at Maimed Har Sinai. What begins as a Zacharti la Chesed Niurayim. Now those words sound awfully familiar. So what we're talking about is essentially the idea of Yosef, the idea of Binyamin, the specific relationship, which of course is a very important component of the Targum HaShivim that needed to be changed, for that very reason. The relationship that should not be confused by the way the Greeks would have been tofes, that relationship was an essential element of the change. Why did you send Na'arei B'nai Yisrael to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Couldn't you find somebody more choshev to send? This was the Zacharti Lach Chesed Yirayich, obviously, that we celebrate in the Haggadah Shal Pesach, of the idea of Rav, Revova Ketzemach Hasad, and so on and so forth. So it is an extremely sensual relationship which cannot stand in the place where there are psychological elements or where it's adulterated with anything that is personal on any level. How did HaKadosh Baruch Hu change that? Kaf Aleim Har Chagigit. The Kaf Aleim Har Chagigit, and the most brilliant element of the Maral's insight, is he turned Kabbalah Satira into an existential reality that was inescapable. Now, once it was inescapable, it escaped all aspects that could have been choshut as being my own personal desire to get something out of it, to give me meaning in life, whatever it is. And to those who were shaykh to the true Kabbalah, it was the secret of the Kabbalah. To those who were not shaykh, so they were like the Ummah Israel. It's all very nice for them to taina at the end in Avodah Zarah. Klum kafita aleinu har chagigit, the way you did to Yisrael. So obviously they understood at the end of time, are meant to understand the value of that. But of course it's a joke. Had I done that, you would have run, which of course many of Bnei Yisrael did. That is the point at which it's transformed into that avas kelulotayach, chesed kelulotayach, is transformed into something that is existentially real, but doesn't stay there. Instead, it filters down into the reality of the love and commitment that is so much and so profoundly part in the deepest parts of self, such as much more important to us than our simple personal needs. So much more that every Kabbalah of Kriyat Shema every single day is meant to be done within the context of Mesiras Nefesh in one's mind. If this were a threat, nothing would stand before that love that I have, the V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha. Where did that come from? Because that's a much deeper love than the Zacharti Lach. Having once been transformed into that level that Yehuda is zeichet to hear with the Anochi Arvenu, Miadi Tevakshenu, it now becomes Nafsho Kshura V'Nafsho, in a true kesher that is so far beyond the personal that it is totally and absolutely reliable as Brit itself. And this is the Brit, of course, that is Niksharat in the end between David and Yehonatan. Now this is exactly between the lines one of the aspects of the multidimensional changes in what is going on in Yosef's mind as well. It's all very easy to look at it as a failure in Yosef in the Lo Yochol Yitapek. But remember that one of the important elements of the Lo Yochol Yitapek is the willingness to surrender. In other words, it's not only Lo Yochol Yitapek, it's the Lo Yochol Yitapek L'chol HaNitzavim Alav, as the Zohar points out. The reality of the interrelationships that have been achieved here by Yehuda are impossible to fight from any point of view that would have a personal component. And the only way that Yosef can respond to it is by becoming exactly like Yehuda. And therefore he says, look, we're in this together, gentlemen. I'm here in order to provide l'michya shalachani l'famecha. That l'michya includes everything. It includes the chiyut of the Shechina, as we saw. That's the hay that the Rabbeinu Bach is meramis to. And I am guaranteeing you that the Shechina is going to be coming. I am guaranteeing you the ultimate promise of Aliyah to Elam Haba because of this change in you. And that's the Bezeh Ubaba. It's from here, says Rabbeinu Bachya, that we have, please mute, that we have, Nafi, please mute, that we have the ability to say, Kol Yisrael yesh lo chelek l'olam haba. Mamish from me. Down. How do I do something? There we go. So that means that we have here a tremendous change in Yosef as well, in the recognition that this is so much bigger than me. His attitude becomes so powerfully businesslike that at the end his brothers recognize that they literally can be his avodim. And that's why they bow down to him to say, we'll be your avodim. And that's the real kiyum at the end of the chalomos. Not the things that are manipulated, but the reality of that we accept you. Because at last we finally see that you are the person that was shayef to be the real Yosef that appeared in those dreams, and not the boy with all of his needs that we saw before. And that changed remarkably. No more silliness. Time for ishtachavoya, absolutely. What's the difference? Nothing is more important than that reality. And that's why the Torah puts the story of Mitzrayim and the food of Mitzrayim after the events with the brothers, not before even the parts that happened before. And it's exactly the way that he himself, Yosef, manages in the end to change what were once entirely self-involved lives of Mitzrayim into pure lovers of the earth, into people who put the Tain Zera and that the Adoma should be Lo Tesham ahead of their own personal lives, which is an astounding change. And then these conditions that led to the building of the Beis HaMikdash, to the Binyamin Yehuda, Kesher Nefesh, now has nothing to do with the personal. Instead, it created a nation in which everyone understood that there is something that defines Yisrael, something that prevented. Hello. Something that creates essentially a mission statement for us that is so much greater than anything that we have, that there's no possible way in which we can look at it as something personal. I want to tell you the most amazing thing. This was the Mamish the week before. So what happened is that the governor of Tennessee, his name is Halson. So he had come to Eretz Yisrael on one of these trade missions, where he meets with all the businessmen and so on, and met with people. And when he came back to Nashville, so he had an interview, like, what did you think about your trip to Israel and everything? I've never seen such a beautiful, simple presentation by a simple guy of something that everybody feels, and have never been able to put that, I saw in writing, and never been able to put their finger on. And this guy did it. And what he said was, like, I'm quoting him, Amish, quote, but if somebody said, what's the main thing that impressed you about Israel? It would be this. It's an entire country that's on a mission. It's an entire country that understands, here's why we're here, and here's why it matters. It's the only place I have ever been where everyone, whether it's the person driving your van, or it's the waiter in your restaurant, or it's a business person that you talk to, everyone understood that there was a bigger purpose going on for everyone in Israel, rather than just what's happening with their family and their job. Is that amazing? It's such a beautiful way for him to actually be made. That is one of the most striking issues, Bichlal, of Yisrael. It defines so much of how people act here. The openness, the roughness. People are not polite. But that's why they're not polite. That is, we're in this together. Well, we have time for playing games over here? Please. Well, you want to turn it into one of, did I give you a pretty smile or not? You're crazy. Go back to L.A. And this is literally, it's very jarring to people whose entire lives is about, how was I treated and how was I smiled at and what entitlements did I get today and so on. And this was the entire transition that takes place in Vayigash. No more silliness. So all plans, all emotions, all relationships are absorbed here by the Anochi Aravenu into an immense existential reality that is so far beyond anyone's little likes and desires that it almost defines the essence of war, as the Rambam describes him. That's the amazing Rambam, who tells us that the idea of Mia Isha Yore Varach Haleva, that the concept of what a person is supposed to be feeling when he is fighting a war for Klal Yisrael, he is supposed to feel Yeda shal yichud Hashem hu oseh milchama v'yasim nafsho bekapo v'lo yira. This is how he defines the mitzvah midiraita of the Meshuach Milchama. Lo yira, lo yafachet, lo yachshov, lo beishto. Don't think about your wife. V'lo bebanav. Don't think about your children. As a matter of fact, not only don't think about them, yimacheh zichronam melibo. Wipe them out of your life. As far as you're concerned, they don't even exist anymore. V'yifneh mikol davar lamilchama. There's nothing else but that war. And that means that all the other likes and desires and care, nothing else can matter. And what's even more amazing, if it does matter, then you are going to destroy everything. Listen to what the Rambam says. V'chol hamatchil, somebody who just begins, lachshov, he starts thinking, I'm thinking, what am I doing? He's ma'arher about milchama. He starts thinking about his family, what's going to happen if I'm killed, and so on and so forth. Kol demei Yisrael tiluyim b'tzavaro. The blood of the entire country hangs on his neck. My God, all he did was start to think. That's the point. There is zero adulteration that is possible in this process. Once you're in that situation, and of course, this is something that is not only Nogea Klal Yisrael, this type of motivation and this sense of mission is capable of existing in any war where that war is defined by a war of existential reality. This is really what happened to transform a pleasure-seeking, hedonistic, self-involved, and politically uninterested Europe into people who were willing to fight with everything that they had in order to destroy the Nazis. And it required that change. And when it did happen, it happened instantaneously. It happened literally, overnight, so that the entire nation became mobilized, even though they didn't want to have anything to do with it just a week before, in which Churchill had been the most laughed-at politician in the world, and all of a sudden was the savior of the nation, savior of the world. So any small amount of personal adulteration, it loses that completely. And this is a new sense of how it is that Miketz relates to Vayigash. Because Miketz means indeed to wake up, something changing. And that very sense of becoming awake is something that becomes the ultimate Miketz from that moment, which is, of course, Vayi Miketz Shoshim Shana Ve'arba Me'ot Shana. The instant Miketz is Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh, as it says in that pasuk. There is a direct relation of the end of that Choshech into Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh. And of course, that becomes here the relationship of Hanukkah to the Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh. And the reason that this is true, we need to understand in a completely new way, is because what we miss here is that it is not simply a change, and it's not simply a new beginning, and it's not simply a new paradigm. And it's not simply a revolution, as unsimple as those things are. It's much more than that. The concept of a miketz, and a day which is identified as Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh, and the reason that the Navi needed to write Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh is not because it was the beginning of something new, though it was. Oh yes, it was. It was the first sense of vulnerability that Klal Yisrael had. I mean, you're talking about a period of history in which 400 years of the existence of the Beit HaMikdash is what we would think about in terms of 4,000 years. It's incapable of being considered as not being there, as we see the stories of the Gemara. And there's the Ashri Adam Mefachet Tamid is an extremely difficult thing. Yes, it was definitely the same intense change that took place in our own times on the Yom Kippur War to a nation that had gotten used to miraculous salvation and unbelievable nitzchonot that were just taken for granted. Oh, it was a heck of a wake-up call, which is miketz, wake up. That's how we actually use it. There was much more than that. What we need to understand is that it was also a tipping point. And a tipping point, as we've explained before, is something unique. A tipping point is a critical point, which has very often in physics and mathematics a very specific definition. But it's a critical point in a situation, in a system, in a process, which after that point occurs, there is basically an unstoppable change. And the effects at which a point, which an issue, an idea, a hula hoop is one of the good examples, a product, it crosses a threshold, gains such momentum that could be triggered by some small issue. And of course, one of the most simple examples of such a thing is an avalanche. Everybody knows the moment in the movie where some jerk drops a little tiny pebble, and at that point the entire mountain collapses, and God help us, and everything is over. Awful, but that is exactly what a tipping point is. And that is the meaning of the change that takes place here. And it's always the idea of miketz, as it's expressed in the Etzem Hayom Hazeh, the unbelievable change of Etzem Hayom Hazeh means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu defines a tipping point. And if it's a tipping point, it is now precisely, exactly, as Rashi speaks out over there, precisely 430 years to the day but this is when it all changed. At this instant. You write down this moment, because it may take you 1,000 years to figure out that this was the moment that everything changed. It takes a tremendous amount of perspective to be able to go back and to figure out when that tipping point was. And amazingly, the definition of the Beis HaMikdash is by a tipping point. And that's the Even HaShatiyah. The Even HaShatiyah was a tipping point, a gravitational tipping point, which, as the Gemara says, it was there that the accretion of the earth occurs. Why? Because of this slight difference, mibaz liyom ktanot, this absurdly slight difference in gravitational attraction because of a slightly larger glob, which became the Even HaShatiyah, around which the entire planet agreed. So you'll say, okay, but I mean, it wasn't significant. Oh yes, every baz liyom ktanot is never significant. Absolutely. Look at Zerubbabel. Everybody's laughing. But in the end, something is put into motion that you can trace back into recognizing that the threshold was crossed at that instant. And that is the deepest relationship that we were meant to have to the special elements of Asara Betevet, calling it the Etzem Hayom Hazeh, the recognition, as the Navi says, of Shvot Asir, Shvot. Put that pot on the fire. It's all very nice to imagine yourself captured by cannibals and being given a nice, delicious, warm bath. Yeah, right. It is a nice, warm bath right now. But the tipping point, as you know, was when they put it on the flames. And that's what HaKadosh Baruch was saying. This is the Shvot Asir. Maybe they don't see it now, but oh my God, will they? And when you're sitting there in the person's fork, you understand that's when it all began. Yes, indeed. Although it might be a little too late by then. And that's exactly what Hanukkah was meant to be. Hanukkah should have been not just a revolution. It should have been a tipping point. Oh yes, it was a transformation into Mamlechet Kohanim. It was a major next step, but it wasn't an avalanche. It wasn't one stone bringing down a mountain. Instead, what happened was that people rapidly adapted to the new situation, and it became merely a beginning. That's the Rambam's words about how beginnings could be an avalanche that destroys everything. V'chol hamatchil lakshov. That's what I'm doing. I just started thinking a little bit about, gosh, what are my kids going to do if I don't make it home? Kol hamatchil lakshov. That can cause an avalanche that leads literally to defeat. Areze kamisha shafach demei hakol. It was lo yimased levav echav kilevavo. And special people were appointed to shoot those people. Shoot them on the spot. This is what we're talking about here. And this is the amazing achievement of Nehemiah. What Nehemiah wanted to do was exactly what Gladwell points out in the whole idea of a tipping point. If you want to bring a fundamental change in people's belief, people's behavior, you first need to nurture that idea that's going to be the tipping point. You need to create a community around them where those new beliefs can be practiced and expressed and nurtured. And that's exactly what he did. He initially nurtured the beliefs in secret B'tzena before it was possible for them to be laughed out of town. And then he gave every individual some level of mission suitable to them, whether it was the actual binyan of the chayma or whether their section was only a chizuk of the chayma, as we'll see the diyukim in the psukim, made to order for that particular group, starting an avalanche that in the end was the real meaning of what Ezra had started but had been unable to turn into an avalanche. He was attempting to do things stone by stone, Ezra, and it went nowhere and ended up with a buzz, the Yom Kitanot. But once that sense of mission began, he nurtured the idea until there was a change in the nature of Hayehudima Umalim, so that people saw themselves differently. They drew directly from Yehuda's achievement here into a completely new vision of reality. That is what is possible to do in both directions, from an Asara Betevet, or to lead one's own life in that fashion. And if you take a look at the loss of a vision of a tipping point, that's exactly what happened after the Second World War, where there had been a sudden understanding, what they call now the greatest generation. And that's why they call it the greatest generation, because people had a mission. And that sense of mission provided them the most unbelievable meaning. Even people in concentration camps had that sense of mission. And that sense of mission was to survive as a Jew. And that itself was an incredible achievement that they saw as being their mission, not their personal survival, but the fact of the reality of the survival of Yisrael. And therefore, that's why you find afterwards a lot of people in the concentration camp say they never had a normal life after that because nothing meant anything to them. Everything was so parav and meaningless. That is the reason that you had the entire revolution after the Second World War, in which all of Europe gave up on the idea of missions, on the idea of identity in the national sense. This is one of the main reasons that they hate Israel, because they view what we are as being regressive, as being selfish, as being self-involved, as being racist, which was another beautiful, that was part of that amazing Moynihan speech in which he pointed out that that resolution was a tipping point, that the world will see hundreds of years in the future as the end of the United Nations, as the beginning of Sheker, that took over the entire world. It's an amazing, amazing idea of tipping points itself. And the Kayach, I think that defines the difference between Yoshvei Eretz Yisrael and those who remain ethnic Jews or religious Jews and have a connection to Torah and to mitzvahs, is this Nakuda, the mission that is beyond your dotan, that is beyond your life in Olam Hazeh, the underlying drive, in which it's an amazing thing that it takes over the relationship that you have to Eretz Yisrael to such an extent that even things that we look at from a shitchiut point of view, we look at it as, oh my God, what a chil Hashem, what a horrible thing. You know, so you've got a crazy city like Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv was just voted the most fun and sexiest city in the world. Now, that is crazy. In the world? This was an incredibly idiotic city just like 10 years ago. That this should be the way the world looks. Now, do you feel a little bit of pride in that? I mean, because that's weird if you feel pride in that. I mean, what is that, gay pride? I mean, what kind of pride? From Mishigas and craziness? But the amazing thing is that the people that are Isaac in that do feel that pride. And what essentially they're saying is, we can even be as crazy as you are and do it better. Anything in the world, we do better. Anything that any ummah is shaykh to, the best of it will be here. Whether it's medicine, whether it's insanity, whether it's intel, whether it's war, whether it's weaponry, whether it's vision, whatever it is. This is the place where it's possible for there to be no limits. And that is the sense that that Tennessee governor picked up. There was a bigger purpose. And it's amazing that that bigger purpose can be total mishigas. But it's a bigger purpose, and it defines what it means to be a chelik of Eretz Yisrael. So rachok from the other element, even of Torah and mitzvahs, and all of the things that people conflate with the mission of Yisrael, don't come near it in its power, and because of that it degenerates into the personal and into the kavod and into the behavioral issues that end up destroying generations of children, that end up destroying the hopes of Bnei Yisrael, and become simply a way that things are to them, rather than the connection to the constant renewed gilui of what is literally today an avalanche of change to those who are connected to it. This sense of the gathering power of that change, in which you see a miketz that begins as a simple end of cheshech, becoming literally a be'etzem hayom hazeh that can be seen in retrospect as having begun the era shel Mashiach, is mamish the times that we live in, and is the translation of the mibaz liyom ktanot into the chen chenla of the binyan bayis hashlishi. Okay, we stuck to our times, I think, Baruch Hashem. I thank you very much for donating your special Nehemiah time to this. I think it gives a new insight into what it was that Nehemiah was deep down doing, and how the Zman of his mourning his death and being aware of the chashivas of his life and its relationship to Hanukkah and to the times of where we failed, in which we were unable to maintain that sense of gathering avalanche, and instead needed to have a targum. So I don't know that this was quoted for by Rebbetzin Yemima. I don't know where she got it from. In that Rav Moshe mentioned to me from his wife that that the idea there was that the only way that we were having that targum was if there was a nace that made all of the shivim, all the zakenim, they ended up giving the same targum. And of course that was a disaster, because that changed the entire idea of the Shivim. This is the parsha of Yatzei Gvulat Amin. Had that Greek indeed been nishletet by Yisro fearlessly, and it would have been expressive of each one of those Shivim's vision, then it would have in fact been a celebration, which instead became mourning. And had there been a response to that Asara Betevet, then who knows what could have been achieved. And if there was a true understanding of Mi Bazli Yom Ktanot today, and a recognition of what it means to be on that mission, each and every individual who is Zocher to that becomes much more profoundly affected by it in ways that allow him to love more deeply, to live more deeply, to experience more deeply, and in direct proportion to the extent at which he is Zeicha, to have achieved that Anochi Aravenu, and to recognize how this is a battle for something that is so profoundly more, not than him, but then the things that he fools himself are him. And that the deepest mission statement of his life are things that are so much bigger than the things that he pretends matter on an everyday basis. This is an incredible change, and this becomes, in the end, the overwhelming nature of the Geula to come that indeed cannot be stopped. And it's because of this that every time that you look at a Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh, you find it has a double meaning. It's the tipping point, and it's the point that everybody resents and tries to stop. So it's exactly as Rashi. Yes, says Rashi. I'll give you 3 examples of places where it says Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh. And in every one of them, people were convinced that it couldn't happen. Nemar b'Noach Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh b'Noach. Oh yes, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. B'nei Doro Omrim, can't be. Imanu margishim bo enu minichino oto likares b'teva. V'lo rananot lim kshilin v'kargamot v'vakim et ater. Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, okay, let's see if you can stop the unstoppable. Hareini machdiso b'chatzi hayom. Exactly. Be'etzem hayom hazeh otzi Hashem. L'fi shoya mitzrim omrim. The moment that we sense that coming, we'll kill every last Jew. Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, yeah, okay. Hareini motziim b'chatzi hayom. Anybody have something to say? Come please and say it. And so too by Mitato Shel Moshe, which of course was an amazing tipping point. Be'etzem hayom hazeh lefi shoya Yisrael omrim, im anachnu margishim anonu menichin oto. Adam shotzienu mimitzrayim, kara lanu et hayam, horid lanu et haman, higis lanu et haslav, hela lanu et haber, natan lanu et haTorah. No way. Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, okay, you got complaints? The world is changing. And that change is unstoppable. So on every level, a miketz is a wake-up that leads to a point that can be seen in deep time as the beginning of unstoppable change, that only at the very end of which, yes, to people who are stuck and dimensionally challenged, and they view an avalanche from the point of view of a slowed-down movie in which it takes a year to experience the avalanche. It may take them a long time to know what's happening. But if you experience it in the sense in which it occurs, oh my gosh, one of the most frightening experiences. May we be zochet to the Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh of the Knisa of the Shekhinah to the Mokum of a Bayit HaShlishi v'tachazena einenu. Laila tov, everybody. Thank you so much for coming.